My name is Tom Goldsby of the University of Tennessee. It's great to welcome you to today's masterclass session titled SAP EWM in the Cloud, How to Pick the Best Deployment Option for Your Business. We're delighted to be joined by Mr. Thomas Gries, the CEO of SAP Solutions at Korber Supply Chain. We reached Thomas today in Germany. If you have been a previous visitor to the masterclass, you might have seen Thomas as he kicked off our masterclass series last week with a session on general best practices for SAP Supply Chain Solution implementation. Today we focus on EWM in the cloud. And in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. I will encourage you to take a look at the GoToWebinar menu, however, as we welcome your questions throughout today's session. If you have a question at any point in time, just please go to the GoToWebinar menu, go to the Questions tab and submit your question. Also note that we do have a webinar specific handout available for today's session titled SAP Supply Chain Logistics Optimize Supply Chain Processes to Increase Efficiency. So again, let's get into today's session. My name is Tom Goldsby. I come to you from Knoxville, Tennessee. I am a professor of supply chain management. I also serve as the chair of logistics and also an editor of the Journal of Business Logistics. And I'm joined today by Mr. Thomas Gries, CEO of SAP Solutions at Korber Supply Chain. In this role, Thomas oversees the global operational model for the organization, including SAP solution development, sales, services, support, and more. He has over 25 years of supply chain experience in SAP software consulting and implementation. I should also point out that Thomas is a proud graduate of the Technical University of Darmstadt, a very good school where he studied industrial mechanical engineering. Welcome, Thomas. It's great to have you back with us for a return visit.
Yeah, hello to everybody. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks.
Well, I'm going to turn things over to Thomas in just a few minutes after I cover a few items. First, why are we here? What is the purpose of the masterclass? Well, it's to expose our audience to today's increasingly complex supply chain and bring you best practices and innovative thinking from academics like myself, as well as industry insiders and senior leaders like Thomas. What are we trying to accomplish with the masterclass series? To provide guidance and insights in managing your supply chain as a source of competitive advantage. This masterclass is dedicated to SAP supply chain excellence and will explore the ways in which companies can most effectively and efficiently deploy the capabilities of SAP's suite of solutions. Today, we'll take a deep dive at EWM, the warehouse management solution, and particularly its implementation in the cloud. You see the schedule for this masterclass, and today is the third of 5 sessions. Successive sessions will occur at the same time over the next week, again on Tuesdays and Thursdays, same time, U.S. Eastern Time, high noon. Note that we have a catalog of recently completed classes that are also available to you on demand. You may review these 4 masterclass series, each consisting of 5 30-minute action-packed sessions dedicated to contemporary topics in supply chain management and advanced technologies. With that understanding, let's go over some housekeeping items here quickly. All of your phone lines are muted out there. As noted, we are recording today's class, and the slides will be made available to you within 48 hours. And in that invitation, you'll also have access to the previously completed masterclass sessions. Again, we encourage your questions. If you have any questions at any point during the presentation, don't hesitate to submit the question, and we'll reserve some time at the end of the session for addressing those questions. I also, again, want to encourage you to take a look at today's handout, which is a brochure from Korber Supply Chain titled SAP Supply Chain Logistics, Optimize Supply Chain Processes to Increase Efficiency. So with that, let's get into today's topic. We look at EWM, SAP's offering in the warehouse management software space, and perhaps some of you have adopted EWM, and you're part of this growth curve. Then you see that the global WMS market is currently estimated at about $2.4 billion US, and is expected to grow on a cumulative annual growth basis over the next 5 years, 16% to more than double by the time we reach 2025. We should exceed 5 billion in this market. However, there is particular growth found in on-demand, on cloud. So some migration away from on-premise to the cloud, which is the focus of our discussion today. You see that the growth rate is almost double in the cloud what you can expect for on-premise. So next slide, please. In talking with Thomas before bringing this session to you, we reviewed what this migration to the cloud looks like for an individual company. And in my mind, it's somewhat akin to the decision to outsource an activity. And we're all interested in logistics and supply chain management. So I hearken back to some research that I conducted a few years ago with a couple of dear colleagues, where we looked at motivations for outsourcing logistics activities of all kinds. So software would be one aspect that you might outsource, but it also could involve some heavy lifting activities in transportation and warehouse operations. So these results indicate that the primary reasons are probably not that shocking to you, that reducing logistics costs was a primary reason, but not too far behind were the ideas of reducing the capital employed, and also the ability to deliver perhaps more accurately, more timely, more reliably for customers, and also improving process flexibility and response times. And you can read down through the list of options given here. I was glad to see that the last option, fortunately our respondents did not tend to view logistics as a rather unimportant process, and increasingly companies of all kinds are regarding logistics not only as a critical process, but a one way to separate themselves from the competition. So again, the migration to the cloud is a little bit different than what we see here with logistics outsourcing, but I do see some comparisons, and perhaps Thomas can identify some of these as well. But in essence, we see that there's intense interest in focusing on core competence within the company, while relying on trusted partners who can lend their core competence to fulfill non-core needs, where the focal company can gain in expertise, scale, and economics. Just to come back to the cloud versus on-premise comparison, if we can go to the next slide, we see in this comparison that there are many specific benefits to cloud-based WMS compared to on-premise, as iterated by this white paper from Korber Supply Chain. But yet it seems that there are arguments that could go either way, with on-premise offering higher degrees of control for the company that can afford to acquire and maintain the system. Fortunately, we have Thomas on hand today, Thomas Gries, who's going to sort it all out for us. So Thomas, what do you see as the distinctions among running SAP's new extended warehouse management system, EWM, on the cloud versus on-premise? What advice can you lend to those entertaining this question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom, for your introduction. Yeah, and I would like to give you, let me see, in brief overview, what does that mean if you want to run SAP EWM, the extended warehouse management in the cloud. Yeah, and just to come back to what you already mentioned in terms of there's a strong growth in the warehouse management solution market within the next couple of years. Yeah, you said it already. There's some growth. Yeah, in the next 5 years, that doubles the business of warehouse management solution, and the increase or the growth in the cloud area is even much more higher. And that is also, let me see, very interesting to have a view on that in terms of SAP. And when we talk about SAP EWM, we talk about, could you please go to the next slide? Then we talk about a solution that's already for a long time in the market. It starts already 2002. It's almost 18 years old, but it doesn't mean that's an old solution. It is an ongoing development and modernization of the solution, especially within the last 5 years, when it comes to the S/4HANA platform, there was a strange, let me see, redesign, development of a new version of EWM. And by the way, this gives also the availability of EWM in the cloud. But I will come to that a little bit later. So what does that mean when we talk about EWM? And for those of you who joined the last session in the last week, they already saw that there's a strong solution for warehouse management by using EWM. And this solution, you can see it on the next slide, fits for different challenges. You can run it in small or even in large warehouses. You can use it for simple and complex processes in the warehouse. And of course, you can deploy this solution on a global scale in worldwide locations with a couple of language and all the stuff that you need to run it as one solution on a global scale. And of course, these are, let me say, more generic topics, but when you see where does this solution run, and of course SAP comes, when you see it on the next slide, comes from the production environment. That means that also the warehouse is running very strong in the production side, but it's also developed within the last, let me see, almost 10 years into the distribution, and a lot of, let me see, specialized verticals and industry, for example, spare parts, and so on and so on. And for those of you who joined the meeting session last week, and they also, for example, that they're very strong in pharma and chemical industry. And so that's, let me see, a very broad solution that fits for a lot of industry and for a lot of processes. And that brings us on the next slide to a very broad solution that has a lot of, let me see, functionality, processes, in the system, for, let me see, also for integrating material flow system, yard mentioned, but also a lot of optimization that you need to run the warehouse in a very, let me see, smooth but also strong approach. And of course, this solution was originally designed as an on-prem or on-premise solution, and SAP has done a great job by, and you can see it on the next slide, to bring this solution also into the cloud. And of course, as always, when we talk about SAP, SAP in the first step, they thought, okay, we bring it to the SAP Cloud Platform. And for those of you who are running already SAP, they know that SAP is, let me see, formerly known as an rather known as an encapsulated system, and they want to do everything by themselves. But you will see that has also changed in the last, let me see, 1 to 2 years. So what does it mean when we run EWM, Extended Warehouse Management, in the cloud? And you can see this also in the next slide. When we talk about a cloud solution with SAP, and that means you can have a lot of benefits by using this solution that's designed for many industry, for many customers, so that you can use all the best practices for a couple of industry, and that makes the solution even stronger, so that we have a lot of pre-configured processes and scenarios available for a lot of industries. And of course, you can have the benefit or the advantage of a modern user interface, of a modern user experience, and that's very strong when you're using the SAP-based cloud solution. And of course, SAP has done a lot of things to make it very, let me see, comfortable, very strong if you run the cloud solution via web front end. And of course, you can have all the advantages of high security, high compliance, highly openness, and the chance to extend the solution. Not only just use the core cloud solution, but you can also extend the solution by using a lot of, let me say, SAP original SAP add-ons, but you can also use add-ons that coming from partners. By the way, also like partners like Korber. But you also have the advantage or the chance to develop own add-ons, so that you can, let me see, have the advantage of both worlds. A classic cloud solution with a, let me see, with a higher standardization on the one side, but you also can adapt some, let me say that way, smaller optimization to enrich process that you maybe need. So at the end, and you can see it in the next slide, the question is, as always, what do you need? What are your pain points? What are your needs in terms of processes? And let's start on the left side. And the left side is just a symbol for, let me see, for the most cloud standardized version in the multi-tenant edition. That means you can use a very strong standardized solution. That means if you, for example, can run where you just need a couple, for example, inbound process, a couple of outbound process, and maybe they fit, then you can use the standard that's given, and you do not have to do any other changes. Of course, the degree of flexibility is not so high, but at the end, you have a standardized solution, and you will get every 6 months an update, so that you always state of the art, have the newest functionality inside, and all the newest version that fits to the current law situation, and all the stuff that you need to be updated with your solution. And of course, if you're going to the right side, and that's not a question of black and white, that's a question of grayscales. At the end, if you go to the most right side, of course, that will mean you will come to a minimum standardized solution. That means you can only use a couple of the standardized solution, but you can also extend with a lot of, let me see, specialized solution. And that brings you, of course, the advantage of much more flexibility in the solution. So on the next slide, I would, to address what we also see in this slide on the bottom is, I said at the beginning, when we wanted to run EWM in the cloud, that always means we have to run it in SAP Cloud Platform. But that has changed. SAP opens the cloud platform also for the other hyperscalers like Google, like Microsoft, but also like Amazon and a couple of others available. And we expect, we see it currently, that others will also follow, so that at the end, whatever you prefer as a platform, you can use it and run SAP EWM in the cloud. But to say it very clear, it depends. Not every scenario is available in every, let me see, variant. So that's a question, and I will come to that a little bit later. That has to be always to keep in mind, has to be asked, and then to decide which solution could fit best. So, but before we come to the perfect solution for SAP EWM in the cloud, and that's the question that is has to be done, has to be asked not only for EWM in the cloud, but I guess for every software solution that's run in the cloud. And that brings me to the, I call it the golden rules of implementation of EWM in the cloud, or EWM as a part of S/4HANA in the S/4HANA cloud. And there are 5 major questions that we always have to keep in mind and ask ourselves every time when we're doing, let me see, a cloud project. And I just want to address 2 or 3 of them today. And I would say the first important thing is, you have to have a cloud mindset and always adhering the fit to standard approach in an agile development. What does, or deployment, what does it mean? For all of those who are already running SAP, and that means all of you have already done implementation project with SAP. And normally that's a typical waterfall model, or maybe hybrid model, sometimes agile, sometimes, but also with a kind of waterfall model. And going for a cloud solution, that's a total different approach. You cannot start with a business blueprint and say, okay, after the business blueprint, I do the customization and add-on development, the testing and deployment, and afterwards I go live and do the hypercare and all the stuff. Yeah, with cloud, it's a different approach. Yeah, and it starts, and I really like this experiment with the discovery phase. Yeah, you have to have a look. What is already there when we talk about SAP EWM in the cloud? What can you use? What is already available when we talk about EWM in the cloud? Yeah? And of course, when you make the discovery, you should do some preparation, try to put them together, put it in, connect them all in let me see, in a prototype. And then explore how the solution works in combination. And that brings me to another golden rule, how you can integrate it into other solutions, other IT systems, other processes by using public APIs, for example, by using APIs that's already available in the SAP environment, in the SAP API Business Hub, for example. Yeah, and you will see there will be a lot of loops back to the discovery phase and all the stuff that you can imagine when you're going more for an agile deployment way. But sooner or later, then you will say, okay, that could be the solution. Then you have to realize you have to make some customization, some add-on development and all stuff. And afterwards, the standard deploy process starts, and hopefully the system runs at the end. Hopefully means it will run, of course. Yeah. So that's a very important, let me see, different approach when we're going for cloud solution. And that's also, yeah, that's the same story for SAP EWM in the cloud. Yeah. So, but this brings me to the next question. One of the, let me see, question that has to be asked in the exploration and in the preparation phase is, and you can see it on the next slide, is at the end, which one of the 5 most relevant scenarios will be the best fitting scenario for me or for my solution or for my warehouse? Yeah, and you can see it on the gray box on the downside of the slide. And I would like to start with the left one, what SAP calls S/4HANA Cloud ES. Yeah, and that's just their name for a multi-tenant solution. That means if you want to run a very standardized solution, and you do not need to, let me see, to optimize, to create specialized processes, then that could be your first choice, yeah, to go for that in a multi-tenant solution. It's a very standardization solution, and of course you will always get all the updates every 6 months. Yeah, and of course, if there are some issues, if there are some errors in the system, they will all fixed by SAP. The second one is, and that's by the way, the one that we see very often in the market, is the so-called SAP S/4HANA Cloud EX solution. That means at the end it's a single tenant solution. It's completely running in the cloud. Yeah? But every customer or every enterprise has running its own single tenant edition. Yeah? And this has the big advantage. You can have the advantage of the multi-tenant solution by using all the standard processes. But you also have the chance, and I already mentioned it in a slide before, you can also implement, for example, add-ons, add-ons from SAP, from partners, but you can also create your own add-ons. That makes the solution very flexible and strong. Of course, there are a couple of restrictions and frameworks that have to be accepted and all the stuff, but at the end, it's a very strong and positive way to enrich the solution. The third one is the so-called private cloud. SAP calls it S/4HANA Enterprise Cloud Edition. Yeah, and that's nothing else that you're more or less running an individual, let me say that way, a special EWM on-prem solution in the cloud at SAP. Yeah, That also brings a couple of, let me see, advantages. Of course, you can join the subscription model, for example, and not have to pay for the licenses. Yeah. And you can do a lot of, let me see, optimization of the solution. And the only thing that's not allowed is to do modification, but this should be always the approach, not to modify the solution, just to do the extensions, to enrich the solution by what SAP allows. If you do not want to, let me see, violating the standard by modification. And of course, what I already mentioned, the fifth solution is you can run these kind of solution with other hyperscalers like I already mentioned, like Amazon, like Microsoft, or like Google. And at the end, what's also possible, you can run the cloud edition in a customer-owned, in a customer-owned or driven cloud solution. That's what we sometimes also see, so that you always can participate on the 2 years available updates and all the stuff. Yeah, but there you have to, let me see, the most of let me see, the value that you say, okay, I run the cloud in my own environment. Yeah, I have even much more higher security. Especially we see it in Europe, where a lot of companies are still believing that they are making much more secure systems by themselves. But at the end, I think that's a big mistake. And at the end, no one does better than the hyperscalers. But that's another question, another story at the end. Yeah. And what you clearly see here is you have the chance to decide between a couple of possible scenarios. You can also run different scenarios. We see it at a couple of customers, for example, that they say, okay, we run for our, let me see, master distribution center, a customer-owned cloud edition. And for all the other small ones that they have, for example, just for small spare parts process, then they say we go to the multi-tenant cloud edition. That's also possible. Everything is possible, and so that's a pretty new world also for SAP when it comes to cloud. And I think that SAP is well positioned, for what we already saw in Tom's presentation, for the growth within the next 5-6 years on a global scale when it comes to warehouse management solutions. And I think that SAP will play there a strong role. And so if you run SAP, always have a look also on SAP EWM, and maybe also for SAP EWM in the cloud. Thank you very much. Any questions so far?
Excellent. Thank you, Thomas.